Hello again. In this video, and then in the next three, we're going to focus in on the land in order to get a better grasp of this place where God has done these incredible things that reveal Himself to us. In the next two videos, we'll be down south in the southern arenas. And then on the fifth video, we will go up to the northern arena of Galilee. But to get us started, we're going to step back and take a broader look at this place where God did these things. Some of the information in this video will be old news to you, and it will be tremendously obvious, but it helps us to understand the biblical story in its broader framework. Here's the Eastern Hemisphere. The land where most of the biblical events happen is on the eastern edge of the Mediterranean Sea, technically called the Central Levant. Actually, it is the northwest boundary of the Arabian Peninsula. Note, as we take this macro view, the brown beige stripe that crosses across northern Africa and into the Arabian Peninsula. This is the Saharan Desert. And this area to the south and to the east is very barren and dry. Also, as we take a look at this macro view, notice that it's the land between. It is the land between three continents. This is very much part of the biblical story as God reveals Himself in real-world settings with all the pressures and issues of life. All three of these continents are involved in events. Down in Egypt, you have the story of the patriarchs, where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all end up in Egypt at times in their life. It's from there the Exodus happens. Solomon marries the daughter of Pharaoh. Rehoboam is attacked by Pharaoh Shishak right after the reign of Solomon, and it is the Pharaoh Necho that kills Josiah. Later, Judah is always looking for aid from Egypt, as if Egypt is going to come rescue them from Syria, when they should have been looking to the Lord. To the east and to the north is the Asian countries and everything that comes from the Euphrates River Valley. This is where Abraham was from, and Isaac goes there to take a wife. Jacob flees there when he runs away from Esau. Later on, they have the attack of the Assyrians, and the Babylonians, and the Persians, which remain in power until the Greeks come in from the northwest in the reign and the conquest of Alexander the Great, which is then followed by the Romans, which is why when Jesus was born, the emperor was Augustus, and the ruler for his trial was Pilate. It's into this Greek and Roman world that Paul does his missionary journeys. Egypt to the southwest has an ongoing influence in the biblical story. It has the Nile River, which produces so much food and is the breadbasket for the Middle East. As you look a little closer, if you fly over the Nile River from the air, its green stripe of fertile fields is distinctive from the forsaken dry area on either side. There's nothing like the Nile in this arid area, a fact repeatedly brought up by the Israelites after the Exodus. Now, if you back up again and look, just to put it in the context of the modern era, there are 9 countries that share this Arabian Peninsula, 3 to the south, which don't come into the biblical story, Yemen, Oman, and the UAE, but 6 countries that are part of the biblical story: Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. You could add a 7th if you want to add Palestine with the West Bank territories. Now let's begin to focus on the land of Israel and some of the dynamics that make it unique. The Arabian tectonic plate, the geologic plate, is moving northeast about 1 inch every 3 years. The North African plate is moving north and northeast a little less than about 1 inch a year. That creates a dynamic geologically which impacts the land in which the biblical story happens. The hinge for those 2 plates is the deepest valley in the world, and it's called the Rift Valley, geologically called the Graben. It begins just south of the Anti-Lebanon Mountains between Lebanon and Syria and runs south all the way into Ethiopia. In it sits the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, and the Dead Sea. The area south of the Dead Sea, called the Arabah, the eastern finger of the Red Sea, called the Gulf of Aqaba or the Gulf of Eilat, it goes by both names, the Red Sea itself, and it travels further into Africa as the Ethiopian Rift. The deepest part of this valley is the Dead Sea, which is the lowest spot on Earth. At its surface, it is 1,400 feet below sea level, and the lake itself is actually about 1,000 feet deep in some places. So this valley that's carved by these two plates moving in opposite directions is very deep. The Sea of Galilee is actually the lowest freshwater lake in the world, and it sits at 750 feet below sea level. This rift is the eastern border of the modern land of Israel. Now, in the Old Testament days, there were 2.5 tribes on the eastern side of this Rift Valley, in Gad, Reuben, and half the tribe of Manasseh. But in the days of Jesus, and for the most part, the story happens on the western side of this Rift Valley. It is often surprising to people that the land of Israel, the place where these biblical events happen, is pretty small. The events happen fairly close together. Let's just compare the size of it to that of the United States. Here's Israel, the shape of Israel, and if you place it over the United States, it would look this size. It is not very big at all. In fact, it's actually even smaller than that when you get into that inhabitable areas. If this is the outline of the shape of Israel, to the south end of it, from Beersheba all the way down to the Gulf of Eilat, is quite uninhabitable. It lies east of the Sahara Desert, as you remember, so it gets little rain. Further to the north, it gets the rain of the Mediterranean Sea. But this area to the south really has no one living in it. Now let's overlay it just to see it a little bit more closely to see the size of it. Here's the country of Israel overlaid across the state of California. That's its relative size. In fact, if you're familiar with California, it would only go from Santa Rosa down to Gilroy and from the coast out to Livermore. If you were to place the country of Israel across the Bay Area of California, at least the inhabitable area of Israel, it would only be this size. It's relatively small. Let's return to the macro image of this area. Note the green as the land of Israel sits up against the Mediterranean Sea. Actually, there are two green splotches which stand out in this satellite image. One is the Nile Delta, and the other side is this western side of Israel in Lebanon. We're going to deal with that in more detail in the upcoming video. This makes this land of Israel and Lebanon unique to the area. You can also see that as you move south, you're east of the Sahara Desert, and it dries out. Let's go in even a little closer. Now, note the green again here on the western side of Israel as it receives the rain off the Mediterranean Sea. Here is the Rift Valley. Now remember the size of this land. It is not very big. It's only 50 miles wide and 150 miles in the inhabitable area from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, which is generally the biblical landmarkers of the inhabitable area. Now, if you would get your Israel study manual out and turn to this page, which is in the front of that book, your map has explanations of our land itinerary when we're going to be in Israel. So I don't want you to mark this map, but I want you to use it so that you can see how we'll be examining the land in 3 parts. We'll be looking at Galilee to the north, Samaria in the middle, and Judea to the south. In the next videos, we'll be explaining what makes each of these areas distinctive, with characteristics that affect our understanding of the biblical story more closely. Finally, find regional map number 1 in your Israel study manual. It is oriented with the east to the top, and the north is to the left. This is a little hard to get used to at first, but almost all of the maps you'll be working with will be oriented this way. They're actually called oriented maps because the orient, that is the east, is to the top. It is typical when you do mappal archiving, and it's not unusual to cartography to have maps laid out this way. Now don't shade this in, but I'd like you to note the three arenas into which we're dividing the land. Galilee to the north, Samaria in the middle, and Judea to the south. Well, that's the broad picture. In the next video, we will focus in just on the southern arena of Judea.